moonshots, and this is something I'm very passionate about. This is something that Google X is very passionate about. So CRE8 actually asked me to come here to speak about radical innovations, but I think what might be interesting to talk about is radical innovators. So the people behind the radical innovations. How do you create not just the radical innovations, but the innovation engine? Right? I look at the wall over there and it says, the spirit of Silicon Valley. It's okay to fail, to live is to change the world. Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. In Silicon Valley, success comes to those who stick out. So what I wanted to share with you are 3 organizations that I've personally spent time with. IDEO, which is an innovation and design firm. The Stanford Design Institute, a D-School that we call very fondly, which is a higher education institution. And then finally, Google X, which is my day job. So it's a global technology company, but we also have a secret lab that does some fun things. So you know these organizations for what they output, right? These are the things that make them famous. The projects that you know about that are very exciting, and I'll share with you some of the stories that are most memorable for me. So let's start with IDEO, the design firm. Little do you know, 30 years ago, we didn't actually have a computer mouse, right? You probably think we can't live without a computer mouse today. Right, most of us have moved on to tablets and things like that, but that's where it started. It started out as a project at Xerox PARC in the late 70s, but somebody actually had to make that so that you could make billions of them. So how did that come about? My colleague Jim Yurchenko at IDEO went to the grocery store to buy a stick of deodorant. So I don't know if you remember, if you were alive in the 70s, deodorant used to have a ball inside it, right? So raise your hand if you remember deodorant with a ball. Like roll it, right? Remember that? So my colleague Jim went to the grocery store, bought a stick of deodorant, took the ball out, and built the first mouse. So if you remember in the 90s, the mice wasn't using lasers, it was using the ball. So he prototyped the first mouse in one day. And that's another story I'll tell you in your course a little bit later. What you might not know is that IDEO also works across many different industries. So before the insulin pen, if you had diabetes, you would actually have to carry a vial of insulin with you in a syringe. So imagine if you're out having dinner with your friends, and suddenly you have to pull out a vial with a syringe. It looks like you're kind of taking drugs, and it's not very comfortable, right? So the insulin pen was understanding that for diabetics, it was actually very hard to manage your glucose in a social setting. And the insulin pen literally revolutionized how diabetics treated themselves. Okay, so those are 2 examples from IDEO. Let's look at the D-School. So the D-School is a very special place for me. I was at Stanford before the D-School even existed. In the time that I've been there, and I've taught there, we've had a lot of amazing graduates come out of the D-School, including Doug Dietz, who is a manager at General Electric, and he designs MRI machines. So to Adam's note earlier, MRI machines are $2 million machines, right? And you can get the technology right and make them beautiful and make them work really, really well. But remember this, it's shocking. 80% of all children actually have to be sedated before you put them in the MRI machine. Who is a parent? Raise your hand if you have a child. Who has a child? How scared are you if your child is sick and the doctor says you have to sedate them in order to put them in an MRI machine? It's because MRI machines are really scary, right? So sometimes the solution is not technological. What Doug Dietz realized after coming to the D-School and understanding how children are really scared, he realized that if you tell a story around going into the MRI machine, children actually want to go in the MRI machine and stay really still. So you tell them if they go in the MRI machine and they're actually going to launch like it was a rocket ship, they'll actually lie still and wait. And when it gets really noisy inside the MRI machine, there's a story around that, they get really excited, right? So sometimes it's not a technological solution that works best. Sometimes it's actually figuring out the human element around it that helps people really enjoy what they're doing. So now zero children who go through General Electric MRI machines have to be sedated. How much better is that you don't have to put your child under in order for them to get a life-saving scan? So JetBlue is another example. So Bonnie Singhi is a VP at JetBlue and a really good friend of mine. So in 2010, JetBlue lost $40 million in 1 week over Valentine's Day weekend. So February 14th, very important day in America. It's like November 11th in China. So you don't want to miss that day, right? They stranded 5,000 people because the company was growing too fast. So what did they do? They had to actually figure out what the problems were in the organization. And they used the design school process to figure out what the key problems were. And once they figured out what the key problems were, they were able to systematically solve them. And 2013, 3 years later, similar storm. Big storm in the Northeast, in the United States. Lots of snow, right? They stranded not a single passenger, and they lost no money. They were the only airline not to lose any money. So I'll talk about Google X a little bit later. We'll dig deeper into these cases. But I just wanted to start with those things, those stories, just to kind of ground you with some examples of not just technological innovation, but people innovation for humanity. Okay, so if we dig a little bit behind the outputs and look at the inputs, these are their secrets. Actually, they're not their secrets. I just copied them off the website. So these are the mission statements of these 3 organizations from Silicon Valley. So IDEO, on their website, it says, they use a human-centered, design-based approach to help organizations in public and private sectors innovate and grow. At the D School, their mission is to prepare future innovators to be breakthrough thinkers and doers. And at Google X, our purpose is to invent and launch moonshot technologies that make the world a better place. It's not that complicated, right? You can write these things, they're not a big secret. You can write one yourself, right? But the trick is, how do you actually do this, right? It's like, we have the why very clear. How do you make it real? Right? So if you read a little bit further, this is not a secret either. They publish this on the internet, right? They follow some very basic rules of thumb in operating, right? So at IDEO, they always start with the user. If you start with the user and you understand what the user needs, you can figure out the technology later and you can figure out about the business model later. But if you get the user need right, you will win. At the D School, we have something called mindsets. So I chose 3 that I feel are most important. It's a little bit like the Nike slogan, it's like, just do it. Sometimes the biggest obstacle in your way as an innovator is you. You are afraid to do it, just do it, right? So we have a bias towards action. That means if you can build something, just show somebody, just like Thomas showed you the satellite, right? You just build it, right? Even if it's not right to start with, you're a little closer than if it was just in your head. So we embrace experiments, right? The first one you build isn't going to be right, but you can do it over and over again and get it right over time. And then finally at Google X, we always start with a huge problem. Start with a huge problem, and Larry will talk about this. So Larry founded Google in 1998. He says, if you start with a problem that affects 1 billion people on Earth, 1 billion, and you find a solution for it, you've created meaning, and the money will come. So you start with a problem that affects 1 billion people or more, you'll make, if you're successful, you'll be very, very successful. So rather than choosing a very small problem, choose a very, very big problem. Okay, so what does this look like? So we talked about mission, right? The why, we talked about how, right? So what does this look like behind the scenes? Right, so these are some photographs from my personal collection. Right, IDEO, this is a human factors research project that we did where this is a time lapse of I think across 4 hours, right? Lots of activities, we're standing up, we're trying to make sense of the data. At the D School, this is a prototype of a new way to go through security. So instead of being in my head, talking about things, let's just create an experience, right? Let's grab something on wheels, let's put people in costumes, let's just see what happens. And then this is one of my favorite. I'll talk more about Project Moon in a moment. But we're like, well, maybe we can launch balloons in the air with a payload. So we went to New Zealand and put balloons in the air, right? So what's common between all these things? People are standing up and they're doing things. And I think this is the spirit of the place that you've created here. So to summarize, really briefly, 5 things. So all these organizations set big, hairy, audacious goals. You don't know how to solve it now, and you go ahead and try to solve it anyways, you're onto something. The second one is you make meaning, the money will come. If you try to make money to start with, you're not going to make meaning. So don't focus on the money to start with. The third thing is just do it. Right? Just start. Right? If you don't start, you're not going to get anywhere. The fourth one is really, really important. So important that I can tell you that the D School at Stanford has a full-time psychiatrist on staff. If you're not failing, you're not learning. But failure, who's scared of failure? Raise your hand if you hate failing. hate failing. You don't want to fail, right? Failure really sucks, right? It hurts when you fall. It really hurts. I don't like to fail. But it's part of innovation. It's actually critical in innovation. The faster you fail, the more often you fail, the more likely you're to succeed. So the D-School actually understands that emotionally, it's very hard to be an innovator. So they have a full-time psychiatrist to help teams overcome failure. When they fail, it sucks. So they can go talk to a therapist about it. And then go make another experiment. And it's pretty cool that way. But most of all, this is the most important thing for me. You can only encourage lightning to strike. You can't make lightning strike. Eric Schmidt, who is the chairman of Google, says innovation can't be owned or ordained. It needs to be allowed. You can't make innovative people innovate. You can only let them innovate. So you create the right conditions. People will do great things, and I think that's what you've done here, is you start to create the conditions in which great things will happen. But if you force it, it's not going to happen. So with that, let's talk about Google X a little bit. Start with a video.
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology, bring them to reality. And that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Galileo is such a hero, in thinking big, and what he represents to me is both curiosity and wonder that humanity had, that pushed him and drove himself to invent and work on the first telescopes that allowed us to see the moon, and here we are.
These aviation pioneers were figuring it out as they went. No one really knew how to build an airplane, right? No one knew how to fly an airplane. It was amazing and crazy and wonderful, and they wanted to explore.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
There's so many challenges in the world, and you can feel daunted by that, and sort of oppressed by that, or you kind of say, how might we think differently about this?
Everyone else in the world is working on that next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. One of the things that's really critical is not only having the courage to keep trying every day or thinking big, even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
I think our ambitions are a glass ceiling on what we can accomplish.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
I believe in the human spirit, and I believe that there are always going to be crazy people who will get out of bed one morning and say, you know what? I think I can build a space elevator, and let's go and do it. But I think that if we become afraid to take these great big risks, we stop inspiring people. We stop achieving things. And the biggest nightmare scenario is that we won't have what it takes to solve the really big challenges.
When Kennedy said that we would put a man on the moon, it's about the fact that he said, we don't know how to do this yet, and we're gonna do it anyway. And that sends chills up everybody's spine. Because if that happens, what couldn't we do?
That's Google special about choosing a huge problem. It's incredibly motivating. I would work at Google X, and I would say that all my colleagues would work there, even if we weren't paid. Even if we never succeeded, we would know that in our lifetimes we tried. And that's the magic of the Google X sort of setup here. So then, what do we do once we have a big problem, right? We try to find a radical solution to solve it. So oftentimes the things that we think about are a little bit science fiction, right? You're like, whoa, why would we ever do it that way? And then because we're a bunch of geeks, we're all mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, computer scientists, we find breakthrough technologies to make the radical solutions possible. So really briefly, these are some examples of the projects that we have, right? Our MC spoke about a number of them already. I'm going to dive really briefly into Project Loon. You've probably read a little bit about our self-driving cars and Project Iris. What's interesting, rather than the outputs, is again the big problems. What are the problems that we're trying to solve? So Project Loon, you are all in the minority. If you're holding a cell phone, you are very lucky. You're one of the 2 billion people on Earth who actually is connected to the internet. Turns out that everyone else, many other people, do not have access to the internet, do not have access to communication whatsoever. You're very, very lucky. Self-driving cars, what are we trying to solve there? It's not just a fun project. Not just because surveying is really cool. It's because 1.2 million people every year die from accidents that could be prevented. Human beings are terrible, terrible drivers. We should not be driving cars. Cars should drive themselves. They should work as a swarm. That is much more effective. And if we can save one life because cars drive themselves, we've succeeded. Finally, Project Iris. This one's very close to my heart. Diabetes is a huge issue in the world. There's 115 million diabetics in China right here alone. And I feel strongly that this is a problem that we can solve in our lifetimes. So, huge problems, right? You know how I talked about Larry, talked about the toothbrush, right? You're supposed to invent things that will help at least 1 billion people. Each of the projects that we do at Google X has to pass that bar. So let's dive into Project Loon and talk about this one because, again, there's over 500 million people in China who do not have access to the internet. You are very, very lucky to be sitting in this room. Okay, so what's the radical solution around Project Loon? If you look at telcos and how we currently connect people, they take steel, right, and they build these huge towers, and they need at least $500,000 worth of steel to put up a tower, and then you put the telecommunications infrastructure on top of it, right? You can use satellites as well, but also very expensive to launch into space, right? And you have power issues because you need a lot of power because you're so far up, right? So, crazy idea, right? What happens if we just cover the whole entire Earth with balloons? It's not like it hasn't been done before, right? Balloons are not super new, but a mesh network of balloons is pretty new. So the goal here is to connect 4 billion people on Earth in the next 10 years or so using the balloon network. And we're hoping to reach people in remote areas and rural areas. Basically, you shouldn't have places in the world where you go to where you lose connectivity, right, because of a black spot. And then finally, if you have an earthquake or a disaster, right, you don't want to wait too long to regain connectivity. So what does this look like? We start to put balloons at 20 kilometers up. This is twice as high as where airplanes fly. This is also twice as high as where there's weather, right? So you ask, what happens if it rains like this outside, right? If you go high enough, there's no rain. So how does this work? Right? It's actually very simple. If you go to 20 kilometers up in the sky, you can predict what the winds look like. So as long as you can go up and down by making the balloon heavier or lighter with air, you can actually navigate very precisely to 500 meters to get where you need the balloon to go. So let's say there's an earthquake for some reason in Sydney, right, in Australia, right? What we can do is then we can take all the balloons and cluster them over Sydney, so we provide them with coverage during that natural disaster and give them that bandwidth when they need it so they can rebuild from the ground up. And it's actually very simple. You can connect with your 4G LTE device directly to a balloon. A balloon will relay your signal across at least 5 balloons. And we work very closely with telcos all over the world because we use their ground stations as the last mile. So we're just a dumb pipe, but we feel that people are being connected on this earth way too slowly. If we left the telcos, it would take them 30 years to build all the cell phone towers needed to give 4 billion people the coverage they need. So I'm going to end with a video of where we are. This all seems like science fiction, but we're actually about to launch pretty soon. And scaling up a project like this is pretty entertaining. Google's a software company, and we started building all this hardware. And given the DNA at Google, we didn't know how to do this, but we figured out how. Let's show the video.
The goal of Project Loon is to bring internet to the almost 2 out of 3 people on the world who don't have internet access today. And we're doing that using high-altitude balloons.
3, 2, 1.
The very first tests we did showed that it could work. So we began to think, wow, we're going to need to have a manufacturing system that can manufacture many of these balloons. We're going to need to have a mission control system that can keep track of the balloons. We're going to need to have an operations team that can launch these balloons and then recover them when they're ready to come down. So each piece of the process got to be bigger. We had to scale up. It was pretty challenging, getting the balloons to be more durable and more long-lasting. For a while, many of them leaked for some reason or another, and they would come down over the course of a few hours or a few days. It was like a detective job to figure out what was introducing tiny leaks. Now our balloons last over 100 days. At first, it would take us 3 or 4 days to tape together a balloon. Today, through our own manufacturing facility, the automated systems can get a balloon produced in just a few hours. We're getting close to the point where we can roll out thousands of balloons. In the beginning, it was all we could do to launch 1 balloon a day. Now with our automated crane system, we can launch dozens of balloons a day for every crane we have. To steer 1 balloon, left or right, you actually go up or down. And that's because in the stratosphere, the wind goes slightly different direction at a different altitude. To provide continuous internet service, you're talking a complex choreography where thousands of balloons are being steered and programmed all in an automated fashion. So another balloon is coming just at the right time to take its place of the one that left. Our mission control system allows us to track every balloon and lets us optimally position the balloons to provide coverage exactly where the people needing internet coverage are. We can track the location and projected trajectory of every balloon from the moment we launch it, on the way up till it reaches altitude, from the time we decide it's ready to bring it down, all the way down the descent till a spot on the ground. With our system, we use LTE, which is a common protocol that most of the telcos around the world use. So anyone with a smartphone anywhere in the world will be able to get internet access. One of the key things we do is we partner with the local telco in every country. In New Zealand, we're partnering with Vodafone.
We like to think of ourselves as being very innovative in Vodafone New Zealand, so we thought this was a great partnership. Project Loon allows cell phone companies and internet providers to provide an internet to communities that don't have it. Ultimately, the goal of any internet service provider is to have 100% geographic coverage and all the capacity and speed that people expect. Project Loon will help deliver that.
If you look at the system today, it's amazing how much more advanced it is, from being 10 times higher data rate to the balloons lasting over 10 times as long, to the steerability of the balloons. We've flown in the tropics, we've flown in the Arctic regions. The technology is working. We're getting close to the point where we can bring the internet to people around the world.
So I do have a dream. I hope that at some point I can help with my team the 500 million people in China who do not have internet yet. Let me finish with the following. I know there's at least one of you in this room here who's a radical innovator. You're probably thinking, I can make fusion happen. Or I think I know there's a solution machine for teleportation, or something totally ridiculous. But you're saying to yourself, you're looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning and thinking, but it can't be done. Someone else should do it, maybe like someone at, a university or maybe like a big company. And then finally, you're probably saying to yourself, well, why should I take the risk, right? It's so risky, right? I only have a 1% chance of succeeding. Like, why should I do it, right? I'll leave you with a Theodore Roosevelt quote that I love, and I always go back to this quote when I'm scared, right? When we do hard things, it's always scary because the chance of failure is so high. So let me read it out. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So dare greatly. Thank you.